the words all right. Did you just get it? I just got a notice that we're recording now. I wonder if Jim forgot to turn on the record button. Anyhow, let me continue, I guess. So I wanted to add the words, it says a short-term event like a sale, and then I added real estate offering or political candidacy. So this is just a class of signs that go up temporarily, typically in front of people's houses. And the kind of the three things that, well, the things we see is real estate signs, political signs, and then occasionally we see some other kind of a sale event going on. So I just wanted to make that a little bit more explicit. Jim, no one else came aboard?
No, there was no one else. And I believe you heard the recording come on. It didn't take the first time. So if you would please repeat what we've done just as approval of the minutes and discuss the agenda just for the record.
Okay, all right. Start back over here. So this is the October 11th, 2022 Livingston Zoning Commission monthly meeting. We have added a couple of items to the agenda, including a discussion of gateway overlay ordinance, discussion of in-person meetings versus Zoom meetings, and a discussion between Jim Berg and Jim Woodall about a process for updating the agendas every month. And then after that, we approved the minutes for June 14th, 2022 and September 13th, 2022 with no corrections. And Michael was going to send those to Faith. So now, because there is no other public at our meeting, we are transitioning to new business, which is the text amendment for the sign code revisions. And we have with us Jack Luther, who's on the Historic Commission, and they're the people that did the rewrite on the zoning ordinance for signs. So he's here to answer any questions we might have. And then I would like to just go through a couple of small changes that I suggested. One is in the definitions, which is 22 temporary signs, to add the phrase real estate offerings or political candidacy to that paragraph, just to make it a little more explicit about what types of temporary signs we're talking about. And then on F2D, F is signs in a residential district, and 2D, it says, no sign shall be erected or placed closer than 5 feet in to the lot line adjacent to the street. And I suggested that we make an exception for temporary signs, which can be placed up to the lot line. In other words, if you're in a residential area and you've got a commercial business going on, the ordinance says you got to keep your signs back off the lot line by 5 feet. And what I'm suggesting is that for the temporary signs, like political signs or house sale signs, that kind of thing, they could go right up to the lot line, which is typically where people are placing those signs. If people have a fence out in their front yard, and that's typically on the lot line, a lot of times signs would be hung right on the fence. So that's the changes I suggest there. And And then the other issue is the question of automated signs. And if I can, automated or animated signs. So the definition is in B2, animated signs, which describes a sign with action or motion, flashing lights, etc. And then to clarify the ordinance on D1, D1 says no animated signs shall be erected in any zoning district except time and temperature signs may be erected in the central business district only. And then it has some language in there about allowing the old historic flashing signs that we see in a few places downtown now, like at the Murray, at the, I don't know, the Owl Bar, at the movie theater, those kinds of places. So I changed the language in there just a little bit. And one thing I added in there is that time and temperature signs shall not be animated and shall not include additional advertising. And I just want to throw that out for your consideration to see if you agree with it or not. One thing I noticed is that, you know, they're out on the east end of town at the casino. There's a animated sign out there, and I think that's where people's focus has been. That's the example we have of an animated sign. But then I noticed also at the American Bank over by Country Foods, they have a time and temperature sign there that also includes kind of a continuous stream of advertising was on it too. So the question then maybe for Jack Luther is what's the opinion of the Historic Commission about that issue? Do we want to totally outlaw all animated signs and only allow time and temperature signs at banks exclusively? Is that your intent, Jack?
No, and I'm wondering if those that sign like at the Bank of the Rockies, or if that would be grandfathered in.
Well, it certainly would be. Both of the animated signs would be grandfathered in, and this ordinance would only apply for any new sign application. So going forward, what do you think the intent of the Historic Commission would be about any future animated signs?
Well, I can't speak for the commission, but I'm assuming that they would be against it, any further animated signs.
Yeah, maybe there'd be a big competition between the banks to see who could have the flashiest animated sign. Maybe that's a problem that would come up. I don't know. Anyhow, that's my language that I suggested. Any further discussion on those changes?
I don't have anything to add, but I approve of your edits.
Okay, thank you, Deborah. Well, in that case, can we have a motion from the floor to approve the sign ordinance that was written by the Historic Commission and with the small changes that I've outlined today? Can I have a motion on that matter?
This is Wendy. I'll move to approve the zone languages provided by the Historic Commission with your proposed changes.
Second, please.
I'll second that.
Michael, I'll give it to you.
Great.
Thank you. All right. So this has been moved and seconded. All those in favor say aye.
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 All right.
Aye.
That passes unanimously. Well, Jack, thank you for your work on this. You clearly spent a lot of time on it, thought carefully about it, and I think it's a good improvement.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
All right, thank you.
Thanks for all your hard work.
All right. So that's that. Now we come to maybe it's the elephant in the room, the gateway overlay districts. And this is a big issue that it has existed since before my time on the Joint Zoning and Planning Commission. And so I don't really know the history of it, but at some point there was the intent to form gateway overlay districts and to regulate those areas specifically. And what the former zoning commission evidently did was draw up a map. And that map is included in the growth policy now as a reference. I don't know, Jim, if you can pull anything up on your computer, or maybe there's a way I can do it. I have it up on my browser. I could throw it up there too, if that's possible.
There's a map, like you say, in the growth policy, and I don't know how to pull it up and share the screen on Zoom. I apologize for that. But I think everybody's probably familiar with it. It's generally the interchange locations, east, west, and south. The growth policy is the only place that map exists. So I don't think it's hard and fast as to its extent. It could be shrunk or enlarged through the zoning process, which will have to happen. But in general, the concept was always about those off-ramp gateway locations, entrances to the city.
Okay, thank you. I have down at the bottom of my screen a thing called a shared screen. I'm going to try that because I do have that page of the growth policy. Most disabled participant screen sharing. All right, I'm not going to do that. So anyhow, we are dead in the water on looking at the map together. It's on page 22 of the growth policy. In my looking at it, I think it would be well worth our idea to look at the boundaries of those areas with a fine-tooth comb. I think there's been enough development in Livingston since that map was produced that we could do a more precise job at defining what those limits are. But I did think that prior to redrawing the map, and that we probably should get very clear about what the goals of a gateway overlay district would be. What is the purpose of having this overlay district? And I know we had Jack on here and he left, but basically what we need to do is write up an ordinance for the gateway overlay districts. And so this would be in addition to the existing ordinance. So each one of these locations has specific zoning designation and therefore zoning regulations that apply. But the gateway overlay would go on top of that and provide some additional regulations for those areas. So I have a list, actually I have about 3 lists here that I went back and dug through my notes, and so maybe I can just read these out as a way to get us thinking about, you know, what we would want to do, how we would want the functionality and the visual appearance of Livingston's entrances to change. And the difficulty, of course, is that some of those properties are built upon, so we're stuck with what's there. Some of those properties are right in the middle of being developed. We've had this subdivision proposal out at PFL that has been in the news lately. They're basically been working on a subdivision based on the zoning, but there are no overlay requirements that they have to deal with. And I'm assuming if their proposal is not approved, well, if it is approved, then this new set of ordinances wouldn't apply to them. There's a new hotel, I believe, going out on the by the freeway out on Park Street. I saw some excavation and foundation work going in there. Is that true, Jim? Is that
Yes.
a hotel
I think
going in?
they're building another, very much a clone to the Fairfield that's already there.
Okay, so there still is some ground there that is undeveloped closer to Park Street. And maybe possibly down the road, maybe the car dealership, you know, maybe converted to some other use too, I don't know. So that stuff's in the works. I also know out past the hospital that there is work going on now to put together a proposal to develop that land out past the hospital. So that's the difficulty. One of the difficulties we have with this ordinance is it's not going to apply until it's been approved by us and then approved by the city commission. And anything that's exists prior to that, it doesn't affect them. So anyhow, in terms of goals for gateways, here's the list I had put together. One is these 3 gateways are the entrances to Livingston. And they're very automobile centric and parking lot centric. There's really nothing to tell a tourist or a visitor or a traveler about the nature of what Livingston is like. So if you are a proponent of increasing tourism in Livingston or increasing visitors coming into town and shopping and dining down in Main Street, then it seems to me you would want to beautify and put some signage in those gateway areas. In other words, you know, that's an argument for those like the Chamber of Commerce that wants to promote additional tourist business in Livingston. So landscaping certainly is a component of those areas. And we could, as the zoning commission, specify a certain amount of landscaping or landscaping buffers between the highway and any construction that went on. We could specify parking to the rear, you know, other things that would limit the visual clutter that is adjacent to the highways. So that's kind of a big thing about it. The other thing to consider, I suppose, might be residential housing. I know at the PFL application, they had proposed a bunch of single-family houses out in that area, and it's, you know, it's a couple miles out of town. It's adjacent to the freeway. The road access isn't great. Is that an appropriate place to put residential housing? So, you know, maybe it would be better as hotels, maybe it would be better as multifamily so that workers at PFL had a close place to live next to their work. I don't know, but that's just an issue I would want to bring up. But we do have in the growth policy a pretty strong statement against sprawl. And because of the void of construction between city and you go past the Voyage property and the Adams property, there's a big chunk of ground in there that is not developed. So in terms of sprawl, it does seem to me to be an issue that should be considered here. Let me look and see if there's any other issues that I think you might be considered. We could certainly talk about setbacks. We could talk about building heights, signage. You know, we could do different signage there than the rest of the town has got. Possibly we could talk about different types of businesses. You know, I had, maybe a year ago, come up with this concept that we have 3 entrances to town and they all have different character. And so maybe what we want to do is try to concentrate types of business activity in those 3 areas. And what I came up with was the PFL property lends itself to manufacturing and to high tech sort of industry and businesses, and maybe it becomes some sort of a high tech park out there. And now we've got a warehouse out there for Federal Express that may fit within that sort of a category. Out of the hospital and beyond, you know, maybe that's medical related. I know oftentimes when a new hospital gets built, soon you see doctors' offices and associated offices develop right adjacent to the hospital. So it may be that, we would allow medical buildings. We may allow senior housing. We could possibly allow mobile trailer parks. In other words, if people come to town, they're elderly and they need to go to the hospital, might make that some kind of a symbiotic relationship there. And then finally, the main interchange, which is by the freeway and Park Street there, that is clearly the tourist intersection of town. That's where our million tourists a year come. They get off the interchange right there. Maybe they gas up, maybe they go to the grocery store, maybe they get the car washed, I'm not sure, but maybe they go to Starbucks. But it seems to me that's kind of the epicenter of tourist related activities. And maybe we want to just kind of keep a focus of that type of activity in that location. Anyhow, those are my thoughts on the matter. Does anyone else have an idea of activities and types of buildings and I don't know, landscaping and signage that would be appropriate for gateway overlays? It's a hard topic.
Jim, did you say that there was any materials from previous commissions that had put any thought into overlay, or was it more just conversations and not anything documented?
I have not run across any documentation. Now, there may well be stuff out there in the webosphere from other city planning offices, which might have typical ordinances that we could look at and maybe find some useful ideas.
Should we start with our design overlay guidelines that we worked on?
Oh, the large format retail guidelines?
We have design guidelines for large format retail. I think the other thing I haven't mentioned is I think within these overlay districts, any new project in those areas would trigger a design review. So just like if you're in the historic district, and there are some other places in town where design review is automatically triggered. So in that case, there would be an extra step for the applicant to go through. So that would be written up in the ordinance. So go ahead, Deborah. What are you asking?
Oh, that was Michael. I was actually wondering, one of the things that I think Matthew did that helped us get moving really quickly on some of our other work was to bring us some examples or put together something for us to start with versus us just starting from scratch. I don't know if that's a possibility in this situation, or if this really should be coming entirely from the zoning commissioner, if we should be responding to thoughts from the city. I'm just trying to think of how to make this efficient as possible.
Yeah, that's a great point. As I said, I'm not aware of any other documentation. I mean, you could potentially go back through 5 or 8-year-old agenda or minutes and maybe find something, but I'm not aware of anything. I could talk to Adam Stern, see if he remembers anything.
I think I was even asking Jim Woodhull right now, like
Okay.
if the city has a role or an interest in putting together any language. I'm sure you don't have a lot of capacity, but I'm just
Well,
kind of
that
curious.
will,
your
that will get
thoughts.
better shortly.
Yeah, yeah.
But my suggestion at this point, if you want to review something to get you into the right mind frame of how to do an overlay, look at the historic district, chapter 31, because take away the historic aspect as you're reading that, and it's a pretty well organized way of doing an overlay. It has a purpose, it has goals, it sets the standards, although they're through the National Park Service and the National Historic Trust. You can write your own standards, but as far as layout and thinking about what the components are, I think that would be a very good place to start.
That's great. Okay.
Awesome. And you said chapter 31?
Yes.
Great, thank you.
And Jim, the process, am I correct in that once we designate these gateway overlay zones, are they being rezoned as gateway overlay zones?
They're being zoned an additional overlay zone. The process is the same as rezoning, but you're adding another layer. The underlying zoning remains. So
Okay,
anything that you don't change in relation to that underlying zoning would still be a use by right, modified by the overlay.
could you walk me through, just so I'm clear about, so then what the public process would be for whatever we do with these?
You're essentially writing a zoning ordinance that creates, in essence, a new zone. In this case, it's an overlay zone that is applied over the top. So you
Yeah.
would write the ordinance that says, it's a two-step process. Let me back up. You have to have the ordinance, like we have chapter 31, that establishes the historic zone.
Uh-huh,
That is a public process because you're putting property into it. That's one ordinance.
yep,
That's the map.
That's the map and the guidelines. So this is where it is, and this is what it means. And then the next process, well, the way I've always envisioned it is you would actually have to zone property with the overlay zone next. You'd have to establish the zone and then apply it to those properties. So it's a two-step process, two different ordinances.
and
Is
that,
that what, go ahead, Deborah.
and that's at that point where the city has to mail all of the property owners.
Right, creating the overlay itself is a text amendment,
Right,
just adding language to the ordinance, so there's no direct mailing because
gotcha,
it affects the entire city.
right,
When you apply it to individual properties, then the notice and the public hearing based on distance from those properties takes place.
got it, okay. I'm just asking because as we look at the zones, I wanted to understand the process to think of, should they all happen at once, or is it worth thinking of them as separate spots?
I think we need to do the overlay and the guidelines and what's going to apply before we can apply it.
Right. Okay,
Jim, did the historic district downtown use that process? In other words, you applied a zoning, a new zoning to that district?
I don't know. It happened in 1981. But now that I think about it, it may be possible to do it in one step if you have everything, including the map with the original ordinance. But then you'd have to go through all of the notification, the property specific notification before you have anything in place, because you're applying it as you're creating it. I'll have to talk to legal counsel, but that might be a possibility to do it in one step, but you'd have to do all the work up front.
It's, you know, there is the possibility that there would be a lot of pushback, depending on what we come up with, so.
Well, and I like to think of them as separate processes, because creating rules to apply to property is kind of a separate step than deciding which properties it applies to.
Yeah. Yeah. I think certainly in terms of her work, doing the text amendment work first and then coming back around to looking at the map makes some sense.
Well, and there's different protest possibilities as well. The text amendment is not as easy to derail, for lack of a better word, than it is when you're applying it to a specific location. Because then there are specific, if a certain number of people protest it, then it requires a supermajority of the city commission to adopt it.
Yeah. I think just in terms of the concept here, if we're trying to beautify the entrances to the city and trying to encourage passerbys to do their shopping and dining in town, you know, there are some allies out there, some people that may get on board with the concept of, you know, call it a beautification overlay or something, you know, and there may be some way of getting some political support on that basis. I don't know.
Can I
Do you
ask
kn-
some questions?
Yes, is this Wendy?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have a couple questions or thoughts. I guess thoughts first. Like all the things you said, yes. But I think I need to understand like a plan too, like that feels like so much. So I need to have a plan. Are we going to talk about walkable commute, like how to make it walkable and, you know, oh, I'm spacing all the words, but strong town, like, and we're going to take on 2 or 3 things each meeting, and how are we going to do that? I think would be helpful in preparation. I think there's a lot out there for communities that don't want to be like literally any town USA, filled with chain restaurants and chain hotels and all of that. And I feel really strongly I want to get something in place that preserves our character, and we don't turn out to be any town, Colorado, or literally anywhere. And I think there's some urgency around this too, with all this pending development. Do we want to think about meeting more regular to like speed this up? Because I would do that. I feel it's that important. And then I think lastly, my question maybe for Jim is, there's that section out in the PFL that was excluded from annexation, I believe, or from zoning, and how can we get that included, or is that just a ship that sailed long ago? So
If we're talking about,
those are my thoughts.
if we're talking about creating a new overlay, that process can include anything. So if you create a new overlay zone, you can recommend that it apply to virtually anywhere as long as it meets the ordinance itself should describe why you're doing it and why it's geographically appropriate. But as long as we do that, you could apply it to any place.
Jim, my question, we already have a map with a boundary on it.
Mhm.
If we just work on the text amendment and get that passed, doesn't that text amendment automatically apply to the map? And then we're sort of done. Except for the fact that we might want to modify the boundaries of the map.
At some point, you have to notify the property owners that they're being included in the overlay through an ordinance process, whether it's separate from the text amendment or included. Because you've got to zone them just like you were originally zoning them with the overlay.
Yeah, I wasn't aware that this was kind of legally applying zoning to those areas. I thought it probably had a little bit.
Yeah, the process is exactly the same as annexing something and just zoning it,
Yeah,
but it's an additional zone.
okay. All right. Well, Wendy and well, everybody here, I appreciate your thinking about the process and how to expedite it, how to be strategic here. I guess first steps is to do some background research. And I think what we've done in the past is, kind of written up the document ourselves. And we could certainly use the format of chapter 31 and use that as the outline. And just kind of have a running outline or a running document that we work on as we go forward. So maybe that's the first step, is just to kind of rough out that outline and make notations of where the holes are and what we need to work on going forward. And then it was Deborah Wendy suggested we meet more often. Certainly now that winter's around the corner, we might be more willing to meet twice a month instead of once a month. And just as a working session, Jim, I don't know if you would need to be there, or we don't need to do notices for these meetings if we're not doing any official business. Is that
They
true?
need to be noticed, but not legally advertised. So
Okay.
Faith can do that for any working session pretty easily.
Just put it on the calendar.
Yep.
Okay, all right. Well, are people up for more frequent meetings to do this? Okay,
And again, after our new staff person is on, certainly by, I would hope, the end of November, she'll be up to speed and be able to supply some support.
okay. Terrific. All right. I'm going to look at my calendar. 2 weeks is the 25th. And then 2 weeks later is the 8th, which is November 8th is their next regular meeting.
That's a holiday this year, Jim.
Which one?
The 8th, it's election day.
Oh, yeah, so we should decide on that too. Let's decide that first. If it's a holiday on the 8th, is there an open time that you might have that week to reschedule the zoning commission meeting?
Are you asking me, Jim?
I'm asking everybody, I guess, sorry.
Staff will be here the rest of the week, so it's up to you guys.
I can still meet if, or we have to reschedule.
Well, Jim, it's an official holiday, so,
Yeah, city office is closed.
okay, let's change the date. So would Wednesday work? The 9th of November?
That works for me.
I'm going to tentatively say yes. I may have a workshop I'm leading in Helena, but if we're doing it by Zoom, I perhaps will still be able to join.
I cannot. I have a board meeting that night.
What about the 10th? On Thursday?
I cannot do that either.
What about the 7th, the Monday?
I think that would work.
I'm gonna
Michael?
tentatively say yes, same answer as before.
Okay. Well, let's schedule it for the 7th, and Michael, if it's not gonna work, let us know as soon as possible. So we'll put. All right, nope, okay. Okay, so we'll do that on the on Monday, the 7th. And then what about the 25th for an intermediate working meeting? How's that look?
That works for me.
Okay,
Works for me as well. Wendy.
okay.
Are we talking about the day after Thanksgiving? November 25th,
Tuesday,
Tuesday,
October 25th.
October 25th.
different month. Skipping ahead, you guys, skipping ahead.
Uh-huh.
Let's see. No, I'm on a flight.
Okay,
But but you guys can meet without me. I can try to catch up on things.
okay. You want to do that? And hopefully we'll get, I'll let Michael Wojcik know. And we'll just schedule a working session on the 25th at 5:30 p.m.
I have a question.
Mhm.
I'm thinking about that area where the other hotel is going in on the Park Street area.
Mhm.
Would the design overlay zoning kind of take care of any of the problems that we're thinking about in that area? Though, since those are done, I guess I'm wondering, because they have not been applied to that area specifically, is that correct?
I think in
Yes, that
looking,
is correct.
I think in looking at the map. I don't know where I'm at here.
I'm just thinking about everything that we wrote about as far as landscaping and parking and all of that. It applies to box stores only?
Yeah,
Or,
yeah,
or other commercial entities of a certain size? Would it
Right.
apply to the hotel, I guess is my question.
yeah, we had a 40,000 square foot size. But it was targeted towards large format retail. And we did not target it towards any other commercial type of business. So at this point, the work that we've done on large format retail would not apply to the new home. And I just looked at the map in the growth policy in that area where the new motel is not included in that gateway overlay.
It's not included.
It's not included.
And I don't think because that has not been applied to anybody, even though there's a map in the growth policy, I don't think the board would be precluded from expanding that if they wish to.
Yeah, that, when I looked at it previously, that seemed like a natural area that should be included in a gateway overlay. I mean, as that fills out there, it will probably fill out with, tourist related commercial projects.
But the hotel is going up at this point. Its plans are approved if they're breaking ground, I'm guessing.
They will have all of their approvals here shortly. We're still working on the water line extension. But yes, they've been through the site plan process and they're going to be underway here before it gets weathered in, I would guess.
Got it. Okay.
Just to kind of fill you in on maybe another approach here. There's a bit of a move afoot to get the zoning commission, the planning board, parks and trails, tree board, and I'm not sure who else in one room together for I don't know, a couple hours or an afternoon or something, because just to get us talking to each other so that we can learn what all our activities have been and what our concerns and priorities are. So not sure when that's going to happen. But on some of these issues, it does make some sense to get other committees kind of contributing toward the discussion. And it seems to me that some of those committees might have some valuable input to this issue of the gateway overlay. These are sort of citywide, impactful kind of initiatives. So that's going on. And the other idea that I've been messing with, haven't gotten too far with, is I'm really continually annoyed by Park Street. It's a lot of traffic and it's a lot of parking lots, and it's kind of an elongated strip mall. And then you got the railroad on one side. So it's a real complicated kind of legal thing. But I do think that if it was a priority of the city commission, that we could, over an extended period of time, do a kind of improvement district all along Park Street. And that would probably, in my mind, be largely landscaping type projects, little mini parks and little plantings here and there, wherever we could find a little vacant piece of ground to put some vegetation on, all the way through town, I think would help tremendously the visual appeal. And then perhaps we can encourage some of the businesses with large parking lots to carve out some landscaping too. That would be really nice. Anyhow, so those are kind of just things that are kind of in the back of my head and that are kind of stirring around to try to make this town even nicer than it is. All right, so that's, I think, what we've got now. So I'm just in terms of wrapping up here, I'm going to get together with Jim Woodhall over the agenda for next month. We're going to have, and that's just the meeting a month from now, I believe.
We can certainly talk about what you might need for the 25th.
Yeah, I'll call you before that and we can talk about it. So we've got that to do. And in terms of gateway overlays, we've got some of these examples that we can dredge up. I'll work on that too. And I think all of you can go pull up the historic district chapter 31 and start looking at that. And then just kind of big picture, I would invite you to get on your bicycles and ride around town or drive around or whatever, and just think about what would help, what would make it a better experience, what would make it a better, more cohesive town. You know, I was in Bozeman a while ago and I drove down 19th from the freeway, and there's a long section in there. I hadn't really focused on it before. There's a strip adjacent to the road that goes right by Costco. That is a landscaping buffer. And then there's another strip going south on 19th, a long way, past a lot of those big box stores. And it's pretty wide, and it's all been planted out. And those, it's a lot of pine trees, evergreen trees there, and they're all pretty mature. But it's actually quite nice looking. So that would be kind of an example of maybe what we could pull off here a little bit. Next time you're next time you're in Bozeman, you might want to just drive by that and notice what the city of Bozeman, I'm sure they mandated that somewhere in their ordinance, that when all of that expansion happened out there, they included a landscape. Okay, that's the end of it. Anything else on our docket? Anything else that should be on the agenda next time? Jim, do you have any projects, zoning text or map amendments to throw at us?
We're busy with some site plan stuff, mostly small housing projects. We've got one out towards Green Acres. We're gonna build like 3 apartment buildings with 15 units. We've got another one on Love's Lane on property that was just annexed here last year, right next to the existing condos. Of course, the granary project is underway. They're going to turn the agri-needs into apartments. So there's a few things going on that takes a lot of time to review.
Yeah, but those aren't zoning amendments.
No, they're not. I don't have any on the horizon. The last ones we did were Call and the property on Rogers Lane. No activity has been initiated on Rogers Lane. I think that property is still for sale.
Oh,
And Mr. Call has started work on his existing building and going to start work next spring on the houses that'll face Montana Street.
okay.
Is it just residential in the agri-needs building? Or are they doing any multi-use?
I believe they're going to have a small retail space in the front of that building, but we're actually still waiting for drawings on what that's going to look like.
Okay.
Gotcha. Thanks, Jim.
You bet.
Yeah, thank you, Jim. Anything else? Anybody else have things for next month? All right, well, I would call this meeting adjourned then. Thank you, everybody.
Good
Good
night.
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 Bye.